So, do you want me to do a few conversational things just to get on everyone done?
Whatever you want to do.
Right,
Can I have the plan, please?
what we're going to do, Arno, we're just going to have a short. We're not going to start filming yet. We're just going to get you feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you a few questions that may be related to some of the questions I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
And then you start to just answer them in your own time. The thing about film is you can be short, relatively short in your answers, but if it's a good story, you can be a bit longer.
Okay.
So,
Are you sure you don't want to film now? But suppose I'm in form, in shape.
Let's have a film. We'll start.
we can do whatever, we can edit, we can do what we like.
It's free.
Okay.
We can do what we like, there's no limit.
All right.
You can sing if you like. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
So Arno Roycer, tell me a little bit about Arno Roycer. Where did you start to get involved in the information industry?
Row, row, row the boat, tinkle down the stream. Band.
How did you start, Arno, in the information industry?
Well, I used to. How did I start? Do I repeat the question? I started my business in this information business. I started my business in this information industry when studying history at the University of Amsterdam, because that's my big hobby, history. What I found when I was studying history is that the art of finding information is much more fun than writing about it, which is what historians do. So what I planned to do is, when I started my history in the first 1 and 2 years, I decided to actually change my hobby and change my studies by dropping this history study at university and go to the Library Academy to study the finer art of information.
So was it librarianship, or was it, when you studied it, was it librarianship, was it information studies? How did they describe what you were then studying?
Well, believe it or not, but this was about 40 years ago. I'm still a young man, but it was still 40 years ago that I decided to change my studies to the Library Academy. And it was called a Library Academy, because the idea of a library is not to give access to books or something, or to newspapers, or old-fashioned information carriers. The idea is to solve information problems. The idea of a librarian is to take an information problem, work on that, analyze that, and provide answers to questions. That's what you learn on the Library Academy. And that really thrilled me, this idea of having access to all that fantastic information. Much more fun than writing about it, because I had the idea, if you know how an archive actually works, if you understand how a database actually works, you have a much more powerful position in the world of information.
Did you feel slightly intimidated though, walking into the library and seeing these vast shelves full of all the best literature in the world? Where do you start to assimilate that knowledge?
When you walk into a library and you see all these information carriers, I don't see any books, by the way. I just see information that can enrich my information position. It is not overwhelming at all if you think that's what's happening. What's happening is that when you see all these books, all these reference works, all these maps, all these CD-ROMs, all these other information carriers, you get a feeling of getting access to information. You get a feeling, a thrill of enthusiasm and passion for having access to the answers to your problem. And that's what I would like to study. How to find the best information, in the best format, in the correct time, about the correct subject for the correct customer. So I can provide answers to my customers that will help them take decisions that may lead to change. That's what I was trained to do. That's what's called a librarian. A librarian is not about books. It's not about collecting books. A library is not simply a storage room full of books or something. A library is a set of functions to solve information problems.
Most people nowadays rely upon Google as their librarian. Do you think that's made them information poor?
Google has not much to do with information solutions. With all respect for a fantastic company, and a company that has done a lot for the world of information, Google has a different business model in the world of information. Their business model is to make as much money as possible based on selling your information profile, based on selling your information position. I don't mind that. For that, I get back a wonderful database and all kinds of services that I can really use. Google is not a library. Google is a company that tries to earn money. And it is not made to serve you and help you solve information problems at all. It's got nothing to do with it.
So when you were training as a librarian,
Oops, sorry.
Continue.
so Arno, when you were a student studying library and information science, what sort of projects did you start to work on?
When I studied librarianship, the first thing you learn at a library is the world of information. What you learn is how is information in the entire world organized in such a way that you can find it back. It's called subject cataloging, which was the term back then, in 30 years ago. Not really relevant now, but you learn the organization of information all over the world. So you can find and pinpoint the exact information you need at this particular moment for this particular customer. That's the first thing you learn. Secondly, you learn a lot about customer care. How can I interpret and understand the answers of the questions, of customers? What do they actually mean when they say, can you get me everything about a certain country? Or can you get me a telephone number of this suspect or this particular terrorist or whatever? Because it could happen that maybe they mean something else. That maybe they have translated their question into something that they think you understand. And it could be there is a hidden question behind it. And the trick of a real information professional is to find out what is really the question there by building a trust relationship. So that's the second thing you learn. Thirdly, you learn almost anything about Boolean logic, about the logic of the building of databases. I was bombarded by lessons on logic, on logical statements, because if you don't understand how to build a proper query, just a normal query, you will not find anything. And that's the basis of everything. If you don't understand how to build proper queries in Google, or in social media, or in Twitter, you'll never find anything. And it's really treacherous, it's really tricky to build proper queries. Just to give you an example there, if I may, if you simply are looking for fraud by a certain person, you are, let's say, a bank who wants to vet a new customer, you may be tempted to type in a search engine, first name, surname, and the word fraud. Which would mean that the word fraud should be somewhere in someone's profile, which is ludicrous. Nobody writes that word in their own profile. That's not going to work. You have to understand how a search engine actually thinks. It is natural language. You have to translate your question into a language that a search engine understands to build up logical queries. And I have wonderful examples where people try to make logical queries and logical statements for the search engine, making the most dramatic blunders and missing 90% of the results. It's not really rocket science. I always say, if I can do that, so can you, my dear customer.
And do you think with the growth of data over the next few years, you're looking at maybe a 600% increase in the available data across the world, even in the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to get more and more difficult, or the skill set needed to extract out the key information has become more and more of a requirement for people?
Since the information revolution, a term that I adopted from some report I read about the information revolution, the increase of cheap data communication technology, the increase of very cheap data carriers, mobile phones, tablets, laptops, etc., the increase of cheap internet accounts where people are now able, since the last 10 years or something, to also produce information. Normally, in the early days, it was so that a consumer would simply consume information and producers of information would produce information. But today, it's a two-way process. Producers of information, consumers of information can now also produce information, and they do, massively. So the information revolution has led to an information explosion. There is so much out there that you get easily lost. And we all know that, don't we? Because most people start their research on a search engine by simply typing in 2 or 3 terms. That's it.
how can what you train people in and what you teach, how can it help people do their jobs better?
What I can do to help people to find the best possible information in the best time, in the correct format, etc., is to teach them open source intelligence, which is a holistic approach to solving an information problem, which goes through what's called an intelligence cycle, which is a little circle with about 6 steps that you have to go through to find the best possible information out there. And it starts with defining the question. What exactly are you looking for? If you say, I'm looking for anything about a...
It will be about what's the process, how can people improve themselves, how can people learn new skills to equip them to deal in the information age? Is that the sort of right question?
That's a bit of a vague question, isn't it?
Vague question, well.
Very wide. Just go to my training.
Stay focused on information professionals.
Right.
That's the answer you'll get.
Right.
Information professionals.
Okay.
And you'll get the right answer.
Right.
But I like what he said is, how do I get the other 98%?
Yeah.
Well, that's where we start.
What I would like to say is, know all these quick food meals that you can buy in the supermarket. 30 seconds, you've got a fantastic 3-star meal. No way. You start how to learn how to cook.
Why don't you say information is like food?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So we're on that, because that's quite a nice allegory. Okay? So how do we get that into a question?
Well, you got to get out anyway, so...
Describe your idea of information.
Don't look at him. You look at me, you don't look at that unless you're making a direct point. Otherwise, you distract the audience and don't know where you're focusing.
But he's much better looking than you.
Yes, but do you want them to believe you or not? If you start looking around, people
I'm
think,
kidding.
people think your brand is
Right.
get distracted. Okay, so okay. Arno, the modern workers, modern information workers, find it very difficult to begin to assess all the data that they need. What sort of processes should they use when they start to try and make sense of all the questions and the information that's available to them?
A certain phenomenon that has popped up the last couple of years in our society is what I call to be Googled, which means that many people think that any problem can be solved by something that is stupidly simple, by finding information by simply entering in 2 or 3 terms. That's it. The world doesn't work like that. People think that they can get access to information by simply reading 140 character messages in Twitter, and that's it. And then they think they understand the entire world. Remember these deep freeze 3-star meals that you can buy in the supermarket? And on the box they promise you, just put this in a microwave, a couple of minutes, and do this, and then you have a 3-star meal? No way. If you want to cook, if you want to eat properly, you learn how to cook. That's how you find and make a correct, proper 3-star meal. And it's the same in the information business. I have a bad message for you. If you want to approach the information problems in the information world the simple way, be my friend, be my guest, but don't come complaining to me when you have taken the wrong decisions and the wrong changes in your company based on the wrong information. You have to invest a little bit in this information process called open source intelligence. What you do is define the process in your own company, work with standing operating procedures on how you are going to define your the databases that you're going to search, the sources that you're going to use, which sources are you going to buy, the big commercial information providers, etc., etc. Then you're going through the entire process of this intelligence cycle to produce the best information possible. The cycle model that I use has a couple of steps. Raw data, which is the bits and bytes you find on the internet or in libraries or in newspapers or on television or in other languages all over the world, which you change into information by downloading that information, processing it, deduplicating it, making it, getting it translated into English or whatever language you master to have good, decent information. That does not make any sense yet. That information is going to be analyzed by human beings, not by a machine. I know what happens. In all these professional computer journals, all these companies make a lot of ads about their fantastic software that can do all your analysis almost automatically. If that's possible, then I am the Queen of Sweden. there is no such software that can predict now what will happen if Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe dies. It simply doesn't exist. I don't believe that. If that's true, I'll go running on Oxford Circuit stark crazy naked. Not a problem for me. You analyze the data to turn that into intelligence. Intelligence is high quality information that is based on multiple sources, that is compared with other sources, that is checked for reliability, that is checked for validity, that is predictive. It predicts what will happen in the future based on the information they found. The intelligence should lead to some decision. Without a decision, no intelligence makes any sense whatsoever. The decision should lead to some change in policy or decisions or purchases or not or sales or whatever. A decision could even be to postpone something. I don't care, as long as you have a decision and change. In my humble opinion, no intelligence makes any sense if there's no decision. Simple. So that's what I try to do for my customers, to help them through that process and to do that quickly. To do that in such a way that the ones who do this information analysis process are accountable for what they do. It cannot be that anybody does research that cannot be done again in about a couple of days. People must be held responsible for what they do and accountable for what they have done. It must lead to some decision and it must lead to some change. Otherwise, it's completely worthless. That's what we do. To do it effectively, smart, fast, and accountable. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense.
Too long now.
It's too long. We have to shorten it down into soundbite. Almost.
Okay.
We've got to. My question is one-liners.
And we're going.
Okay. And we'll literally start from the top again. So Arno, what is open source intelligence?
Open source intelligence is a holistic process of finding the best information out there in open sources, analyzing that information to produce actionable intelligence that you can use to make decisions that can lead to any change.
What are the benefits of using open source intelligence?
The benefits are that open source intelligence is open.
So I say the benefits of open source intelligence.
So I'll ask the question again. Repeat back my question and then we'll continue, okay? What are the benefits of open source intelligence?
The benefits of open source intelligence are, one, that it is open, which means you can purchase that information and you can share that information via open means. There's no classification rules or secrecy rules whatsoever. Two, there's lots of it, of open source information. About 80 or 85% of all information available is open source information, so it should be anywhere. Three, it is relatively safe.
Sorry, can you say 85% of open source intelligence that's out there is free, but you will only find 2% of that on Google?
Yeah.
That would be true. Is that a true statement?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we want.
So
just, if you take it from
eyes me.
85%.
Right. Arno, give us an idea of the internet. In terms of open source intelligence, how big is the internet and how big is the open source intelligence of the internet?
The size of the amount of information in open sources, you can easily say that of all information available, about 80 to 85% of all that information you can find in open sources. The little problem is only 2% of that you can find through a search engine like Google. 85% of the information you can find in open sources. The benefits of open source intelligence are not just that most of the information is available out there somewhere, but it's for free. You don't have to go through difficult processes like signals intelligence, which costs you a fortune to get that information. It is safe, because you can purchase that information from behind your desk. You don't have to send out informers or spies or something. 4, am I at 4? You can get that information fast and quickly using equipment that you have on your desktop already. You don't have to buy extra equipment for that. There's all kinds of benefits for that. You can actually disseminate that information without any secrecy or classification rules because it is open. The only thing that is not open on open source information, open source intelligence, are the conclusions, the decisions and the changes. That's classified. But the rest is all open. It is cheap, it is massively, it is out there, only for you to grab, as long as you know how to do that.
Why should customers trust you and the team at Andy Black Associates to help them with their information and their communication problems?
My big advantage as a person, as a professional, with my background of 25 years military in the intelligence and security service, I have built my own open source intelligence shop 25 years ago, trying to combine information I found on the internet, which by then was brand new. I have actually experienced all the developments on the internet from the beginning. I am a professional, information professional. I am a professional librarian. I know how the world of information is organized, and I've got access to all these commercial databases. Together, and the processes that I've learned, I can actually help people to put that into their own organization and apply that to their own situation to be much more productive and much more safe. These two things, productivity and safety, security.
And by working as a collaborative team, does it give you much, does it increase your capabilities in terms of the services that you can begin to offer to customers?
Obviously, this 98% of all the other information that you cannot find through a search engine or whatever, there is so much information out there on a wide variety of subjects, formats, types, etc., and all kinds of characteristics, that working in a team of collaboratives, working in a team of experts is an absolute must, so that each and every individual in that team can specialize on their individual parts and excel and be the best. And that's why you want to hire experts, so you can tap our brains. To share you a little secret, I'm now 57. I think my time now has come to share my passion for information and share what we know. And I would like to do that, and I must do that with all the other experts in the team. There's an expert on social media, there's an expert on finding satellite data, there will be an expert on whatever else that is. We all need to specialize because there's too much. We cannot do everything. That's impossible. The generalist doesn't exist anymore. Anyone who claims to be a generalist and can teach anything and share anything, no way. I cannot believe that. You must have a team of experts so we can concentrate, each of us, on our own little expertise and share that passion.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions you think